Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Basdeo Pandey, Leader of the Opposition, Mrs. Pandey, Mr. Pilgrim, Principal, graduates, members of the staff, parents, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be asked to introduce a man whom I've known for the past 20 years. A man who is a philosopher, a teacher, politician, trade unionist, statesman, former acting prime minister, musician. Mr. Pandey is an accomplished player of several classical musical instruments and also a marathon walker. I first met Basdeo in the early 70s when I was introduced to him by Rafiq Shah, and at that time we were involved in organizing the cane farmers, and Basdeo was in the process of rescuing the All Trinidad and Sugar Estates and Factory Workers Trade Union from internal turmoil as a result of the aftermath of the death of Badis Sagan Miraj. Basdeo was born of humble roots in a small village, St. Julian's it was called, on the outskirts of Princestown in the Sugar Belt. Grew up, like most of us who grew up in the Sugar Belt, in a thatch roof house. Went to school barefooted. Worked after his education here. Worked as a cane weigher, then as a teacher. Then proceeded to go to England to pursue his studies, where he attended London University studying economics. Then he went to Lincoln's Inn, where he graduated in law. It was while in England that Basdeo Pandey had first-hand experience of the shackles of colonialism. What colonialism did to third world countries, certainly to countries like Trinidad. So when Basdeo came back to Trinidad, he immediately got involved in struggling. In fact, the word Panday is synonymous with the word struggle. Basdeo contested elections in 1965 together with people like George Weeks, Lennox Spear, and so on, for the Workers and Farmers Party. He was also the legal advisor to several trade unions, including the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. The meeting I referred to back in 1974, that culminated in a series of events where, together with other trade union leaders like George Weeks and Joe Young and people like Alan Alexander, we formed the United Labour Front, and we contested the general elections in 1976, and we won 10 seats in Parliament. Basdeo Pandey was elected as the member for Couva North, a position, a seat that he has won in every successive election. But the bedrock of Pandey's character, ladies and gentlemen and graduates, is his selflessness. At great personal sacrifice, Pandey has decided to commit his life to struggling for justice, dignity, and equality for all men of all races, all colors, and all creeds. Pandey has committed his life to fighting oppression and fighting the injustices that exist from time to time. Even when that cause came into conflict with high office, Pandey chose to remain on the side of the poor and the oppressed. That was the case when he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. And that office came into conflict. He gave up the trappings of those offices and stood on the side of the poor and the oppressed. Pandey, brothers and sisters, despite all the odds, will continue to grow from strength to strength. Certainly a legacy indelibly written in the annals of history. Basdeo has come here today in all his humility to be with us. So Bas and Uma, on behalf of the principal, staff, graduates, and members of the wider community, I want to extend a very warm welcome to you and Uma to the Warrenville Presbyterian School today. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to present to you the man himself, Basdeo Pandey.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. Mr. Principal, teachers, parents, school supervisor, Mr. Pilgrim, distinguished guests, my former comrade in arms and partner in crime, Ramesh Lachmedial, graduating students, or is it now graduated students, my brothers and sisters. First of all, let me thank you most humbly for the honor you have bestowed upon me by asking me to deliver the feature address today at this most important ceremony. I was telling Mr. Pilgrim that while he spoke, he brought back so many memories to me, memories which I thought I had lost. And that is like him, I too went to a CMI school, that is, the St. Julian CMI school. What Mr. Pilgrim did not tell you was that CMI in those days stood for Canadian Mission Indian. And it was because the group that came from Scotland, from Canada, from the Presbyterian Church, the Canadian Mission were Presbyterians, and they had come here to work among the illiterate sugar workers and their children. And for that, we must be eternally grateful to the Canadian Mission and the Presbyterian Church. Because of that double honor that has been bestowed upon me, that is to say, the fact that you invited me and the fact that I am where I am today because I received my earliest education at a Canadian mission school, I thought that I would not be able to deliver to you today an address which is an off-the-cuff, an off-the-mill, run-of-the-mill speech, an oft-repeated speech at these graduating ceremonies. I thought I would have to do something else. You know, on occasions such as these, people like me who are asked to stand up here and speak generally pontificate to everybody, telling them all kinds of things about how they must, they're young and they're going out into the new world and how they must study hard and obtain high grades and go to university and become professionals and so on, how they must be honest in their dealings and truthful and disciplined and generous and so on. All that is very good. That is excellent. And these are things that you must abide by, and these are things that you must heed. But these are things I am sure that you have heard over and over. And today, because of this enormously important occasion, I thought I may seek to discuss with you something beyond all those moral and admirable qualities of which you have heard so much from your teachers, to whom you owe so much. I thought I would therefore inquire into the reasons why one should be honest and disciplined and hardworking and generous and kind and so on, why one should study hard and so on and so forth. And my brothers and sisters, graduating students or graduated students, and first, while I'm on that subject, let me congratulate you sincerely. I noticed when you were coming up here that you have won places in a very wide spectrum of schools, and that speaks very highly of you. As I say, I thought I would touch upon something quite different and really go behind the reasons for actions. Because you see, you are young children. I was there once. And I know that as you go through life, probably one of the most difficult things you will encounter It's a question of decision making. There are going to be many times when you are going to be confronted with situations in which you are going to ask yourselves, shall I do this or shall I do that? What shall I do? And those are difficult questions which people have lived their entire lives and have not answered. My function here today is merely to excite your minds so that you may find a formula, a yardstick, a measuring rod, by which you can answer these questions that are going to confront you as sure as the night will follow the day. I have struggled with that question many times in my own life. And I think the truth came to me in a very sudden way. About 5 or 6 years ago, I'm sure you all will recall, I had to undergo cardiac surgery, a heart operation, as some people call it. And I remember I was in England, that's where I went to have it done. The night before I was supposed to go on the surgery, some friends of mine called me and says, well, Bas, how you feeling, boy? Tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow you're going to have this operation. How do you feel? And jokingly I said, well, if the operation is successful, I have nothing to worry about. And if the operation is not successful, well, then I have nothing to worry about. Because I'd be dead. And it dawned upon me, but what have I done in life? What was the purpose of life? Why was I born? I know that I am born, and I know that I shall die. The question is, what is the purpose of the in-between? What is the function of my life? I've come here, I've occupied space on earth, and I'll die, and I'll be cremated or buried or otherwise. And it dawned upon me that maybe the most important question people must ask themselves is, why am I here? What is the purpose of my existence? And I came to the conclusion, wrong it may be, I'm not asking you to accept it, I'm just teasing your mind so that you may think about it yourself. And I came to the conclusion that the function and purpose of life, or rather, among the most important functions and purpose of life, was happiness, to be happy. I argued with myself that if God was merciful, then God couldn't have put me on this earth with a capacity for happiness and joy and then condemn me to hellfire and brimstone. God must have intended that I should lead a life that makes me happy. But then came the biggest question. What is happiness? How do I define it? How do I know what it is? And the Hindus have a concept called Maya. It's called illusion. And that is, it says that all men, women, human beings pursue life consciously or subconsciously looking for happiness. The biggest problem is he doesn't know what it is. And many times he has illusions. He thinks things will make him happy. And he pursues them to find out that he is on his deathbed and has never been happy because he pursued the wrong things. So that there are many things in life which we believe will give us happiness, and it does not. And if you can find the answer, that what it is will make me happy, then you will have no problem in your life to answer the question when you are confronted with the dilemma as you go on in life, shall I do this or shall I do that? The answer is, you must do what will make you happy. If you find what happiness is, you can live a life, a fruitful life, and when you are confronted with dilemmas and the trauma of decision making, if you can ask yourselves, which act will make me happy? If I do this, will it make me happy? If I do that, will it make me happy? And as I say, the only problem in that kind of reasoning is that you have got to know what happiness is about. And maybe you can find it by looking at the very nature of man. Human, when I say man, please ladies, I mean you too. I remember going to a function at the Susama Church and I kept talking about man, what the role of man and so on and so forth. And the women almost killed me. They said I wasn't talking about that. I want to assure you that I use the word man in a generic sense, that I mean mankind. So, in order to find out what will make you happy, or what are the real things that make you happy, I think if you look at yourself as a human being, that ought to help you. And also, your faith and your religion, if you look deep into it, it will also help you. Man, or rather, let me start from the other. The Bible tells you that man shall not live by bread alone. I interpret that as a clue. I interpret that as a clue to finding out what is the nature of man, and therefore what are the things you have to do to make man happy. And the fact that the Bible tells us that man shall not live by bread alone really indicates to us that man has two dimensions, at least two dimensions to his being. And that is a physical dimension, his body, and a non-physical dimension, his spirit, his psyche. The thing you can't see, some people call it his soul. And there are two things, therefore, you have always got to do in life. If you want to be happy, you've got to satisfy both of them. You've got to satisfy the body, the physical body, so you must have food and clothes and shelter. And therefore in your life, as you pursue your life, I'm sure, children, you will be looking at those things that are necessary to give you physical comfort, food and clothes and shelter, and so on. But if you think that that is all that will give you happiness, it is likely to lead to greed and envy and jealousy and that sort of thing, if all you do in life is you pursue those things that only satisfy your material well-being. And you will therefore have to learn to satisfy your spiritual, your psychical, and your psychological well-being. That is, the spiritual side of you, your soul. You remember the Bible also says, does it not? What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the world and lose his soul? And so many of us have failed to find happiness in our lives because we have sought to gain the world at the expense of our soul. So that if I am to leave anything with you, graduating or graduated students, if I am to leave anything with you, maybe you wouldn't appreciate or understand much of what I say today, but I'm sure you'll remember it. And as you go on in life, you'll remember this conversation piece and this talk. And whenever you are confronted with decisions, I am sure you'll remember that Mr. Pandey came and he said that I will face this situation. Shall I do A or shall I do B? Or shall I do C or D? And that the measuring rod, the yardstick to answer that question will be, would it really make me be happy? And I don't want to make a long speech to you, but I want to leave that with you. I want that to sink so deep into your mind that it will provide the formula by which you'll never be unhappy. You know, I was telling you, if you look at your Bible, whatever religion you belong to, it doesn't matter whether you are Muslim, whether you are Hindus or Christians, whatever religion you belong to, if you look deeply inside of it, you will see that what I'm telling you is quite true. Remember I was telling you that if you believe that man was only body, only physical body, and there was not a spiritual dimension to him, that he would end up being unhappy. Well, the Bible does say, does it not, that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And the way I understood this, it really meant, it doesn't mean a camel, a real camel, going through the eye of the needle, the one you sew with, doesn't mean that at all. In fact, that phrase came about because of the way people used to live long ago. Long ago, there were city-states, little groups of people all over the place, having tribes, and this tribe fighting that tribe and so on. And in order to protect one's city, they used to build a wall. The Romans developed that kind of, the Greeks as well. They used to build a wall around the city to protect the city from invasion from the enemy. Because in those days, they had horses and foot and so on. That's how they used to fight. They didn't have atomic bombs and so on. So they used to fight with horses, and so they built these walls to prevent the enemy from raiding the city, and the people used to live inside the walls. And they had the big gate through which the people would enter, the main gate. But people would have to come into the city from various sides. And what they built was a narrow little opening in the wall. And that opening in the wall was sufficient for a man and an animal, horse, I'll tell you, to come through. Small animal and a man to come through so that he can enter. But not enough for soldiers to rush in and kill everybody and so on. And that opening in the wall was really referred to as the eye of the needle, because it was shaped that way. So that a camel could go through the eye of the needle. The Bible didn't say that the camel can't go through the eye of the needle at all. It said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And that simply meant camels used to have a lot of load on them, you see. And in order to enter the city, they had to throw off the load, the burden, the physical accretions, the physical attachment to which they were. So that I thought myself that that was a lesson that the Bible was teaching us, that if we wanted to be happy, we had to know how to deal with physical things. We had to shed physical things. We mustn't become so attached to physical things that we cannot enter the eye of the needle. That is, we mustn't hold on to our possessions. If we hold on to our possessions too tightly, we become the possessed rather than the possessions. We don't possess things, things possess us. And you have seen that in your lives, that people have killed for land, people have robbed for money, people have committed all kinds of atrocities, nations as well, for land and for money and for things like that. And these things won't make you happy. So that it doesn't mean that you mustn't seek to acquire wealth and so on, but you must not let wealth acquire you. That is, you must own things, but you must never allow them to own you. You must not become so attached to them that they make you unhappy if you are deprived of them. So my brothers and sisters, that is the only lesson I can leave with you. And it is one that has come not only from reading the Bible and other books and so on, but one thing that has come from experience. And as you go on in life, you will find also that there are moments of unhappiness. There can be no happiness unless there is unhappiness. You will never know the joy of eating unless you experience the pangs of hunger. So that there are many times when you will be unhappy. No matter how unhappy you are, always remember that this day too will end. Just as the sun has risen, it will set, and just as you are unhappy, so too this day will end, and your happiness will, or your unhappiness will come to an end. My brothers and sisters, Mr. Principal, this was a most exhilarating function for me. I'm most grateful to you that you have invited me to speak here today. And when I listened to your record of 90% placement, 30% in 5 and 7 year schools and so on, 11 people getting total marks in certain subjects, I can say that the fact that you are overcrowded is a compliment. That is, the fact that your school is so overcrowded, it means that people want to come to your school as opposed to going to other schools because they know the value and the benefit of this school. I see you have launched a new dimension in self-help when you talk about building your own furniture. I remember There was one school that closed down because it didn't have any furniture. Yours will never. When I listen to all of these things that you have achieved, I understand perfectly well why you have been hiding your teachers and staff and keeping them in such low profile. If I were you, I would do the same, for fear that others may steal them from me. You have much of which to be proud. The school is 40 years old, and it continues to be the gateway through which many lives pass and through which many lives succeed and contribute to this nation. I hope that Almighty God will be kind enough to shower upon you his choicest blessings so that you may continue the great works that you have done for so long. And students, I hope God will bless you so that you may find happiness not only today, but for all times. God bless you.